So today we're going to be talking about how to use wrist locks for self-defense. Now I know this is a topic that's been covered quite extensively. The problem is most people teach you how to do wrist locks in a way that's absolutely not applicable for self-defense. Although it might be good technique for the dojo and it might be a good technique with someone who's allowing you to do the technique, the majority of wrist lock techniques that you see in videos and in demonstrations are just not practical for self-defense. Now today we're going to be working on wrist locks versus a grab. Now to be able to be effective using Jujutsu wrist locks for self-defense, you've got to be able to do three things. Number one, you've got to counter grab. When they grab, you have to counter grab so you can feel the energy. Number two, you've got to be able to control that arm and control the distance. That way you know which lock and which technique you can do in the situation. And number three, you've got to be able to utilize various strikes to specific targeted areas to neutralize their attack so that you can effectively do the lock. Let's look at some of the things that they kind of do. Let's see, grab here. So the most common wrist lock that we see that people do is kata, right? Or emote gyaku. So they're going to take this and they're going to go to this outward wrist lock, right? Another common one that people do is uragyaku, right, or urakote, where they just go the exact opposite, where they turn it this direction. These techniques, whether it's kata gaeshi, urakote, or some people call this emote gyaku, and then uragyaku, they go back and forth, they practice moving back and forth. Very common techniques that you see. The problem is the way that they apply the technique, what the person is doing to them isn't reflective of what you would see in a self-defense situation. Generally, to get a wrist lock in a self-defense situation, they're going to have to grab you. That's the most practical way of doing this. Now, I do want to preface before we show a couple techniques here is when you're training in martial arts, regardless of the art, once you gain a higher level of skill, a lot of these techniques that you see are more practical, they're more possible. But for someone who doesn't really train that much, they only go to the dojo a couple times a week, they don't have a lot of experience, those techniques are just not practical for self-defense. So let's look at what someone can do that doesn't have a lot of experience, but they just want to have a few tools that they can use to get themselves out of a situation. So the easiest way to apply a wrist lock practically in a self-defense situation is against a grab. The first thing you want to do against a grab, you want to counter grab. And the reason for that is we've talked about this many times. He pushes and pulls, I can feel this and I can kind of ride the wave, right? So now he pushes me and pulls and I can kind of fight against him. I know what he's doing. If I don't grab at all, he's just going to yank me around. I don't know where I'm going. So if they grab, counter grab. When you counter grab, you got knees, we have elbows, and as you release that, you're going to push down and then just strike straight down to the ground. And again, from there, pin, get your hand in position to throw your strikes. Counter grab, so if I counter grab same to same, meaning this side to this side, we got the outward wrist lock. If we cross this side to this side, now I can use into ura. So same concept. Once he grabs, I want to counter grab. And once I counter grab, I want to move over the top of his arm. And when I move over the top of the arm, I still want to get to the same position. I want to be able to go over the top. I want an elbow shot here, growing shot there, and I can still take that down with that ura wrist, with the wrist lock right here, pinning him. So he grabs. I'm going to counter grab. As I counter grab, I step forward, get into the middle meridian. We've got elbow shots. We can kick to the growing, and there's the wrist lock. Pressing down, taking them into position. You can even use an arm lock, getting them down, and then pinning in this perspective. Generally, when you're using Jujutsu wrist locks for self-defense, the opponent either has something in their hand as they present the threat to you, or you're in a close quarter situation and they're grabbing onto you. Now, regardless whether they have something in their hand or they're grabbing on and you're in this close quarter situation, if you understand how wrist locks work and you can effectively do wrist locks, wrist lock techniques can be a great way to protect yourself in a self-defense situation. Now today I did not go over what are the best wrist locks for self-defense, nor did I go over how to do wrist locks for self-defense. What we went over today is how to use wrist locks for self-defense. And again, when you want to utilize wrist locks in a self-defense situation, you have to be able to do three things. One, you've got to be able to counter grab. Two, you have to control the arm and control the distance. And three, you have to be able to utilize the various strikes to neutralize the attack so you can effectively do the lock in a self-defense situation.